Here's today's In Touch devotion.
Today's abridged scripture reading presents the familiar story of David and Goliath in 1 Samuel chapter 17. We encourage you to read verses 1 through 53, but our condensed narrative begins with David's response to the Philistine giant's challenge to King Saul's troops. In verse 26, David asked, "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he has dared to defy the armies of the living God?" And David said to Saul, "May no one's heart fail on account of him. Your servant will go and fight this Philistine." In the next few verses, the young shepherd recounts the victories God gave him while tending his flock. Verse 37. And David said, "The Lord who saved me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear, he will save me from the hand of this Philistine." So Saul said to David, "Go, and may the Lord be with you." Then David took his staff in his hand and chose for himself 5 smooth stones from the brook, and put them in the shepherd's bag which he had, that is, in his shepherd's pouch, and his sling was in his hand, and he approached the Philistine. Then the Philistine came and approached David with the shield-bearer in front of him. When the Philistine looked and saw David, he was contemptuous of him, for he was only a youth and reddish, with a handsome appearance. So the Philistine said to David, "Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. The Philistine also said to David, "Come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the sky and the wild animals." But David said to the Philistine, "You come to me with a sword, a spear, and a saber, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of armies, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will hand you over to me, and I will strike you and remove your head from you. Then I will give the dead bodies of the army of the Philistines this day to the birds of the sky and the wild animals of the earth, so that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel, and that this entire assembly may know that the Lord does not save by sword or by spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will hand you over to us." Then it happened, when the Philistine came closer to meet David, that David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet the Philistine. And David put his hand into his bag and took from it a stone and slung it, and struck the Philistine on his forehead. And the stone penetrated his forehead, and he fell on his face to the ground. So David prevailed over the Philistine with the sling and the stone. He struck the Philistine and killed him, and there was no sword in David's hand. Then David ran and stood over the Philistine, and took his sword and drew it out of its sheath, and finished him, and cut off his head with it. When the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they fled. Then the men of Israel and Judah rose up and shouted, and they pursued the Philistines as far as the valley and to the gates of Ekron. And the Philistine dead lay along the way to Shaaraim, even to Gath and Ekron. Then the sons of Israel returned from their close pursuit of the Philistines and plundered their camps.
David's battle with Goliath was more than a fight between two nations. It was a defense of Jehovah's name and a challenge to those who doubted his supremacy. King Saul doubted that the young man could be victorious over a seasoned warrior like Goliath. But as David pointed out in today's scripture passage, the only way a boy with a sling could defeat the giant Philistine was by the Lord's hand. In confronting Goliath, David showed courage, but what really drove him was righteous indignation, saying, "For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he has dared to defy the armies of the living God?" This narrative is often read merely as a triumphant underdog tale. Modern audiences may take comfort in the belief that they'll never have to deal with such a scenario. But the real story is that David stood up for God, and there are times when we should do the same. We don't need an academic degree to defend our faith. Our smooth stones are the truths we've learned from the Bible. Just remember that whatever the outcome, the battle is the Lord's, and He gives victory to the faithful.